So let's jump back to the mid-1980s with a nice low-budget action thriller that's actually a sequel to a 1950s television series. So let's get in with it with Rutger Hauer, Gene Simmons, and Robert Guillaume in Wanted, Dead or Alive. Nick Randall is an urban bounty hunter, a lethal professional who collects society's garbage for a living, and romances Terry aboard his broken-down boat that he's hoping to earn enough money to fix up and retire on. Conversely, Michalak al-Rahim is an international terrorist with a plan to turn Los Angeles into a bloody battlefield. When Nick's old friend Fillmore Walker requests his help to hunt down Michalak, he ultimately accepts the job, but wants no interference from the joint FBI-CIA task force, having been burned by the CIA in the past. However, when the CIA uses Randall as bait to trap the madman, the hunter becomes the hunted. When the violence hits Randall's home, the bounty becomes a mission of very personal vengeance that he will stop at nothing to see carried out. So Wanted, Dead or Alive, released to U.S. theaters on January 16th of 1987, comes to us from director Gary Sherman, previously done the horror film Dead and Buried, the sleazy exploitation film Vice Squad, and right after this would do Poltergeist 3, which I've covered here on the channel before. But how the whole film kind of came up to his attention was through the producer he worked with on Vice Squad and New World Pictures, and the producer had bought the script based on the knowledge of the 1958 Steve McQueen Western television series Wanted, Dead or Alive. But Gary Sherman kind of thinks that the producer didn't actually read the script before buying it, because Gary Sherman read the script and was like, this thing is awful. It's absolutely terrible. So it was a whole thing. It's like, okay, let me work with my collaborator here, Brian Taggart, to kind of hash things out and rebuild things from the ground up. But the interesting thing is that they pre-sold the movie to exhibitors and distributors and the theater chains based on the name alone before they actually wrote the new script. And so they told Gary Sherman, you got 2 weeks to write this thing because you already dated it for release on this point in time for all these theater chains and distributors, all these different things. So it's like they pretty much just went 24/7 running gun through the whole thing, 14 days straight, to just burn the whole script out onto page. And Gary Sherman does feel like he really would have liked to had some time to let the script kind of ferment a little bit, kind of let yourself live with a script for a certain amount of time. And I definitely sympathize with that. Just like when I write scripts, you gotta have a little bit of time to feel it out and have it kind of live with you and stuff like that, and kind of like go give it a little break, come back fresh, and kind of look at it again and kind of do some rewrites and touch up stuff like that. So I definitely very much sympathize with him. But it's kind of a very interesting thing that I learned about his process, is that he really kind of goes in and tries to write these very extensive biographies of these different characters that he creates. And for Nick Randall, the character portrayed by Rutger Hauer in this whole film, he wrote like pages and pages, like dozens of pages worth of an entire biography of this character, the background of him. And that's such a very interesting thing. Like a guy like Michael Mann does a lot of that same type of thing to build out the histories of his characters and get so much depth into them. And that's something I've also kind of picked up here and there doing my own scripts and film projects here and there. So it's a very interesting, in-depth sort of analysis he does to get into the substance of his characters, to write them out and kind of live with the characters so much, to kind of impart it on the actors he cast for the roles. And there is such a particular way how Gary Sherman wanted to approach doing this film and the style he wanted to go for and various different things, like kind of a neo-Western in a certain way. Like Nick Randall here, this bounty hunter, is very much kind of that carryover from the Steve McQueen character, the great-grandson of that character, and wanted to have a little bit of that sort of Western outlaw type of flair to it in a certain way, but melded in with the sort of neo, almost noir type of thing. It's got almost this, in a certain way, with the cinematography in certain places, in the nighttime sequences, like it feels almost like a Walter Hill film. Stuff like The Driver or 48 Hours, stuff like that. It has a little bit of that greenish mercury vapor sort of sheen to it, all that type of stuff. It just has a certain quality that kind of brings out that sort of urban noir type of thing going on in the 1980s with the slickness and stuff like that. it has a certain energy and a certain feel to it in a certain way that kind of reflects the kind of intent that he had for the visual style, calling it a nuclear winter of sorts. You want this kind of overcast, washed out type of feel that everything's kind of dark and grim and a little bit bleak here and sorts. So it's like so much of how the film looks is so right on the money for what he really wanted it to look like. Just have these sort of muted kind of blue tones going on here and there, not really kind of bright sunlight and whatnot. Everything's just a little bit kind of gray in a certain way. It doesn't really kind of pop out in a certain type of way. It's a very muted color scheme. It's just like, it works so well for that. It gives a certain mood to the whole film, a certain just grit to it in a certain way that kind of permeates through so many different things, how he wants to make the film feel and get that sort of ambiance of the entire story going on in the entire film. It's a really good piece of work. How there's not like a great amount of like really flashy type of stuff, but there's some really inspired moments of cinematography in the film that really kind of captures something when they're kind of looking at a certain set piece or different things here and there. They really kind of capture really good images in certain places, and just like overall the intention of the color scheme, the mood and sort of muted quality really kind of gives a certain edge to the film in a certain way. And it's actually the interesting thing with the casting of the whole film, because Rutger Hauer was not the original choice that Gary Sherman wanted for the role of Nick Randall, because Gary Sherman had become very kind of entranced by this new Australian actor coming up in the world after he saw Mad Max, and got very much on top of wanting to have Mel Gibson in this role. So probably around the time they were starting casting, he'd probably just done like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, so he just made this big American blockbuster, and like right at the same time would have been when he got Lethal Weapon. And his agent knew he was going to be a big star, all these different things, and wanted $2 million for the use of Mel Gibson in the film. When the actual budget of this film ends up being $4.5 million, that was never going to happen. James Caan was also considered. He was also interested, but Rutger Hauer's agent said Rutger will take a pay cut in order to be involved with the film. So, landed on Rutger Hauer after he'd done such great work just in this short amount of time. All the stuff, Nighthawks and Blade Runner and The Hitcher and all these wonderful, just riveting roles he'd done up to this point. Totally, possibly couldn't have a better quality actor here. Even though you could definitely see Mel Gibson doing a role like this. You could definitely see him in the role. Rutger Hauer makes it his own, and he does so many interesting things where he just feels like a tough badass in this whole film. Just from the beginning of the film, you just absolutely positively just see that. He completely fits in the role physically. He delivers the role as a quality performance. You're just like, he's got all these little things in the whole character makeup here. It's like he's a very charming type of thing. You see this wonderfully warm chemistry between him and Mel Harris. They have really good scenes that just have a very easygoing charm to them that I think really just clicks on screen so much. And Rutger Hauer had so much of a say in who they cast in this role, and just like he had a very good camaraderie with her to make sure that all that stuff kind of worked and felt very comfortable together doing these scenes. And I just like so much the quality of the character of Nick Randall. He's just this kind of very, very savvy type of guy who's very righteous as well, because he's dealt with all these shady CIA guys, and he got really fed up with dealing with these people, being involved with them for so many years, and just like cuts out. Doesn't really like what he's doing now as a bounty hunter, just taking out this trash all over the place, but it's like he just wants to make enough money to fix up his boat and just kind of just hang out and stuff like that. So he's very content, just get what he needs to just kind of retire and do what he wants to and stuff like that. So this guy kind of like he has this moral principle. He has this rock solid sensibility about himself, dealing with all these things that he doesn't enjoy dealing with. All this criminal scum and all these shady CIA guys and all this corruption that's kind of swirled around him, and people trying to use him as live bait in this whole sort of situation and stuff like that. It's like, it's just a wonderful little character. Just like you can just zero in so much on his characters. Like, you know what this guy's about. He's straight arrow. He doesn't deal with any kind of bullshit, and he just kind of, you see all the little things are just like up against him in the whole film. You just definitely get a hook into the character of Nick Randall here that Rutger Hauer does, add in little things here and there, just make him interesting and stuff like that. And Gary Sherman kind of really wished he could have got some like regular humor out of the character portrayed by Rutger Hauer here, because apparently the only thing Rutger really did in terms of that type of stuff was kind of like this more darker, blacker humor. Like when he comes up with the guy who kind of killed his friends and he kind of locks him in this cabinet and starts unloading the shotgun at the guy to kind of interrogate him in this intense type of way. And he's got this kind of smile and this kind of sadistic quality to him. So I was like, wasn't entirely how Gary Sherman kind of hoped things would kind of pan out with the character in a certain way, but Rutger's got such a screen presence. He's such a big guy on screen, just kind of exudes something that's very strong. He handles everything very well. He's very physical and where he has to be. He grabs the character in those charming moments, but also has the fire to the character. He's got these sort of conviction, this kind of intensity to him in certain places when he starts having to deal with certain things like Jerry Hardin's character, who's this CIA shady type of guy who just keeps screwing him over and stuff like that. Just these different moments, and it kind of builds up, kind of ramps things up a little bit more. Just like I like these moments where he can kind of spark off, kind of just jumps in this situation there, like how he can just get that up and kind of builds it up when he gets into the final act of the whole film. It just kind of just shows more of the fire, more of the intensity, just kind of amps up the entire thing going on. So it's like Rutger does a very solid job with the whole film. Again, the character doesn't have a ton of substance to it, but just like what he can grab from the character really comes out on screen so well, and just get a very solid actor here to drive the narrative forward. And I just like what he does with the character. It makes him very likable and does a lot of good stuff with him. And it's such the interesting thing, getting Gene Simmons of Kiss in this film as Michalak Ar-Rahim, where it was the whole thing where Gene Simmons he got a hold of the script. He just kept calling Gary Sherman, and Gary Sherman just had this kind of idea like some drugged up rock star who wants to be in my movie. He doesn't have a lick of talent, stuff like that, but he was so pleasantly and just deeply surprised by who Gene Simmons actually was. A very articulate, intelligent, educated, cultured man. He spoke 5 languages. He had all the right dialects to use for this character of Michalak Ar-Rahim. So he knew Hebrew. He was born in Israel, and so he had all these different dialects he could get into and new languages that could aid in the performance of the character. And he just really had a very strong, sensible business mind about everything and could really relate to what Gary Sherman was doing for the script and kind of get into that and kind of strip away his own sort of self in the whole thing. Very much strip away his own kind of political ideals and stuff like that, and kind of meld himself into what the character needed to be on screen. And Gene does, again, good goddamn job with this whole thing. He doesn't have a ton of screen time in the film. He has a few scenes here and there, but he's got a presence, man. That deep voice he has, he knows how to use that. He has a very cold, grim demeanor to him, just this intensity, just this kind of subtle type of thing going on with the whole film. Just like he doesn't have to do a whole lot. Being this guy who's very used to being very big and flamboyant and extroverted on stage, he knows when you get on film, you need to kind of bottle that back up and get a little more introverted, kind of get that stuff kind of just subtly into the performance and all that type of stuff. So, like, he learned really quickly as a film actor and really was kind of dedicated to just developing himself. He'd been in films like Runaway. He'd been Never Too Young to Die. He had a nice guest starring role on Miami Vice. So it's like the guy just kept working it, kept chipping at it here and there, just getting all these little roles and whatnot to kind of build himself out and working with some nice actors and nice filmmakers to really kind of build himself forward. So he was very dedicated towards that end. And I think he does a really good job with this character. They do some chilling moments with this character that that moment just terrifies you. Just like the whole thing of this guy who's blowing things up, that's kind of has more of a raw nerve now than it did back in 1987. But is the whole thing with Gary Sherman, like he had some criticism at the time, was like they thought there was like anti-Muslim. But the whole thing was like it was anti-terrorism. Terrorism is abhorrent to him. It's disgusting to him, as it does for a lot of people. And so he was very much intending for the whole thing to be an anti-terrorism message in the film and not against any type of religion or way of life or lifestyle, stuff like that, or belief system. It was very much more towards that disgusting, violent type of act. So Gene Simmons definitely understood that. He brought that to the screen. He just had a very cold portrayal that just does a lot of good things. I think if he had more time on screen, he really could have dug a little bit more deeper into the character, have a stronger impact on things, a little bit more complexity. So it's like, again, the whole thing with Gary Sherman, like, would have liked to have more time to sit with the script and kind of develop it a little bit more, kind of chip away and kind of reworked a few things. Maybe he could have done a little bit more with that. But what Gene has, the screen time he has, he makes the absolute most of it. And if he had gotten more of it, I don't have any doubt that he would have done even more with it. I think he did a really solid job here. I think he does a very effective job in this role to make a very convincing and very intimidating villain on screen. He got a few little smaller roles in this whole thing. Got William Russ as his character, who's just a friend of Nick Randall here as his sergeant in the LAPD, as Quince. And it was kind of the thing where it's like he's a really damn good actor. Doesn't get a whole lot to do in this film, but you definitely see his charisma, his energy on screen, his enthusiasm. You got a lot of things where he just has a really good chemistry with Rutger Hauer there. And the whole thing was like he had this great episode of Miami Vice. Another Miami Vice thing. Where it's like, when I did my Manhunter review, I got him screwed up with Stephen Lang, who Stephen Lang playing Freddie Lounds in Manhunter looks a lot like how William Russ does in the episode of Evan. But that's actually William Russ in that role, in that episode, and it's one of the best goddamn episodes of the entire series. He did a fantastic job in that episode. Doesn't get as much here, but Gary Sherman knew he was a really damn good actor and put in this nice supporting role that does add more into the film overall. And like I said, Jerry Hardin, a lot of people know him later on from the X-Files as Deep Throat, but the guy just specializes in playing these kind of shady government figures, or just kind of, maybe like X-Files, he's a little bit more benign, a little bit more benevolent, but he plays a lot of sleazy kind of government types and whatnot. It's like he does a really goddamn good job of, he's a really excellent actor. Really just nailed it so much with the character of Lipton here, where he just pushes the buttons. And you get to see he's just kind of sleazy and stuff like that, which is the exact opposite of Robert Guillaume, who's a fantastic actor. He was still doing the sitcom Benson at the time, really acclaimed sitcom of the 80s. Just a really talented actor, just did comedy so very well. Could dial into the action genre a little bit here with the dramatic supporting roles. He later shows up in the Jean-Claude Van Damme film Death Warrant. He does a really good job here. Just like, he just has this sort of energy and charisma, just kind of aids the film in so many different ways. Just the sort of attitude the character Walker has when he's kind of dealing with Lipton, Jerry Hardin's character, and these different areas of the whole film where he's kind of battling against these guys who are just kind of setting up Nick Randall and doing all these kind of things that are not very ethical and stuff like that. So it's like he has this sort of friction and this kind of punchiness of how he deals with these characters and these situations. So he has a strength to him that just adds so much more into the core qualities of the film, and have this great relationship with Nick Randall there where, yeah, Randall doesn't care for any of the CIA stuff, but he does trust Walker there. And they have this little bit of a conflict here and there in the whole film. But they work so well together. Just like these little moments that Guillaume adds into the character just add a lot more richness to the whole character, and just adds a little extra bit of something here and there that just improves the film with his presence and his talent so much. It's so much of what a supporting actor should do to enhance and fill up the entire film and just do all these great things. Just like the cast is really well put together. All these people are just really damn good actors. And this is really solid type of stuff. I just can't ask for anything all that much better for how Gary Sherman put together the cast for these characters. And now the music from composer John Renzetti is kind of an interesting type of thing where it's like, it's only kind of available on vinyl. They kind of re-released it and stuff like that, but it's like, it's not very much in circulation on any kind of digital format. So it's very hard to kind of get a copy of it to use for the video here and kind of comment more on. It's like, there's not a whole lot to say about it, but it does service the film very well in the different qualities that the film wants to go with. A few little things, they have a little bit of a motif for sort of things going on with Malek Al-Rahim, and some little things where the harmonica kind of comes in and plays these little things here and there. So it's a nice little score. It doesn't kind of like stand out or jump out at you or stuff like that, but it kind of services the film in a nice type of way. And so much with the film being only about $4.5 million budget doesn't give you a lot of leeway to do a lot of big and plentiful action sequences. But the film does have some nice stuff that Gary Sherman really likes directing action. He does a lot of good stuff with it. That when they get a few moments to punch things up in the whole film, it really just aids the film so very well to just have, again, first off, we're opening the film when you got Nick Randall going in and grabbing this guy as the bounty hunter, stuff like that, and just kind of shooting out the place. Really nice scene there, and they got a nice car chase in the whole film that just like, yeah, this feels really good. They just kind of move it forward. Just like it really punches the whole film up in a really damn good way. Just like I love the whole sort of thing where after he blows out the front windshield, later on there's got this really nice shot where they got everything really just nicely framed, going through the crack in the entire windshield and just framing up Rutger Hauer. There's like really nice type of things. Again, the cinematography just hits off really good beats when it has a little something to work with. And just like the action sequences are so very well staged. When you get up to the climax of the film, just have a really nice piece of suspense going on. Just like the photography really just punches up in so many different ways. And it really just comes off in a very good type of way, just like to have the action when it really needs to happen in the film, in the narrative, kind of gets those points. And it just really it gives you the payoff you need in those moments. So it's like they really do have a limited budget to do a certain amount of stuff here. So it's like it doesn't come off like big action like it's Lethal Weapon or Cobra or Die Hard, stuff like that. It's not big and slick and off-zone and just like doing a whole bunch of stuff. They have a certain amount of stuff to work with the resources they have. But Gary Sherman does come off with a very solid piece of work here that every time they go into the action is very satisfying and pays off what you need to in the story of the film. And so like everything comes off very well. It's like, even if you're kind of like sitting through the film with today's eyes, it's like, okay, well, it's not super exciting, stuff like that, and like it might not have as much kind of depth or whatnot with some of our action films that you might be thinking of like the best ones ever. It certainly has a payoff at the end of the film here that's worth every goddamn moment you spend in this whole film. It's one of the best goddamn endings ever. It's like payoff to the nth degree of everything we have going on in the whole film. It's just amazing. It's amazing. Fuck the bonus. It's what Nick Randall says right at the end of the film after he catches the bad guy and all these different things and he's collecting the bounty. It's like, fuck the bonus. And just like, there's a better payoff than cash for him at the end of the film that's absolutely fucking spectacular. I don't care. Everything is worth the ending that you have there. It's phenomenal. I'll burst about that every time. It just sends me off the deep end every goddamn time I see that explosion happening at the end of the film. It's wonderful. But Wanted Dead or Alive, okay, like it's one of those films like it kind of goes a little bit under the radar because it only made about $7.5 million at the box office, and Gary Sherman kind of says that New World Pictures wasn't doing a whole lot of promotion on films they were releasing at the time. They were kind of like, let's just slip it out in the theaters, and then we kind of put it on home video and get money from home video, stuff like that. So it's like, they didn't push it as much. So it probably didn't have as much of a marketing budget. So maybe eked out a bit of a profit there, getting the share back to the theater owners and getting back what you spent on the film. Who knows, but I'm certain it's had a life. It's not a big life. It's kind of a bit more of a cult film in a certain way. They kind of like, maybe not like a big strong cult film, but like there's a consistent interest in the film over the years where you get on VHS and then like you got a couple DVD releases that were always just kind of like everyone just really wanted to kind of grab the DVD release. Even today, you find eBay auctions where it's still selling for a nice price versus other kind of DVDs that kind of sell for pennies. People still have a kind of hunger for this film. They have a memory back to this film. It's like, that's really kind of good. Rutger Hauer's cool. Gene Simmons is the bad guy. That's worth some money. That's worth some goddamn money. And Gary Sherman's a solid director. He puts together a very nice picture here, just like he knows what he wants to do with the film. He knows how he wants to look, how he wants to feel, how he wants the actors kind of work with the script in certain places. He knows how to work with the actors and get some really solid action, put this whole thing together. It's like, this isn't like going off and giving the action to the second unit on some big action film today. He's actually there shooting the whole thing. He's there on the truck when they're running around the streets of LA shooting this car chase and whatnot. He's there while they're shooting it. So it's like all these good things. Like, it's a really solid piece of work. A little bit low budget, but it just has a certain quality to it that's like, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool in certain places, like Rutger with all the fucking guns and the leather and the motorbike and stuff like that, and kind of lives on this boat a little bit. They just kind of want to fix this up. Just want to get some money to fix up the boat. It's this nice little charm to the character of Nick Randall that just kind of gives you a little something to kind of connect with the film, and Rutger does a really nice job with it. So it's like, I can recommend it definitely. Just the Kino Lorber release is really goddamn good. Just the quality of the scan they did for the film, the new transfer they did, looks beautiful. Just looks better than it ever has before. Get it if you can. It's really nice. Little interview from Gary Sherman on there, as well as actress Mel Harris. Really nice, entertaining commentary track between Gary Sherman and his producer on the film. Just nice. It's a nice, solid release. Kino Lorber does a really respectable job with their releases. Might not be the most lavish things all the time, but like, they put a really nice effort on things. I think they're really good distributors that you need to keep on your radar for a little bit of these kind of lesser type of titles that are like, not always the big blockbusters, kind of a little bit underappreciated gems, and this is definitely one of those type of films. So guys, if you've enjoyed Wanted Dead or Alive in the past or in the present, just give me your thoughts on it. And certainly, of course, you could talk Rutger Hauer performances all day long. They're fantastic. So guys, thanks much. Take care. Bye-bye.